You need to stop complaining about the ceiling and start raising the level of the floor so that you can have the standard of life and business you deserve. Okay, so today we're going to talk about actually setting a minimum standard. This concept was kind of like reminded to me this morning. I was listening to a story from a friend of mine, Laban Ditchburn, world's greatest coach. You should check him out, Laban Ditchburn. Anywho, we talk about the standard of living, and I think about when it comes to a standard, what are you doing to decide what's acceptable? Do you realize that that's exactly what a standard is? A standard is literally saying what is acceptable and what is unacceptable in my life. Now, entrepreneurs set a standard. It is a minimum bar that must be accomplished. And when you set the minimum, what you're doing is you're saying, I will not accept anything less than that. Well, that can be applied to your life as well. I will not accept anything less than, diligence in what I do. I will not accept anything less than a certain level of income for your family. I will not accept anything less than a standard of communication in your marriage. When you set these standards, what you're doing is you're taking your focus off of, well, I can't get past this point, and you're saying, I refuse to go below this. So many people struggle because they always see something that's outside of their reach, and every time they don't achieve it, they fall back all the way to the old pattern and say, I'm just not capable. So instead of making that such a dangerous fall, when you rise up and you accomplish something, say, that's my new standard. I can't do less than what I'm capable of doing. And then we incrementally raise the standard in that area. So I talk about business because most of my clients are actually asking me for help in business. So we're going to use that. And one of the things that I struggled with was actually communicating with other people, to reach out, to have conversations, to become a better communicator in everyday communication skills. And so one of the things I said is, I gotta do more of something if I'm gonna be good at it. That's the way it was in boxing. I didn't go out there and throw 2 jabs in a right and win. I've done that. 3 punches, fight was over, done. No problem, it's a win. But nobody looked at the tens of thousands of jabs, the tens of thousands of right crosses and uppercuts, and countless push-ups and running and jump roping and drills. Nobody saw all the repetitions, but I saw the result of the repetition, and I said, I can apply this to my business as well. If I just know the right technique, then the only thing I have to do is add repetition. So I made a standard. I will have at least 1 conversation with a new person each day. And that was my standard. I couldn't go to bed unless I had 1 conversation with 1 new stranger each day. And I didn't care if it was, hello, how's the weather? It had to be an exchange with that person. And I always said, I'm going to start, my standard is I'm going to have a video conversation with somebody once a week. I'm going to have a text messenger or a messenger conversation once a day. Well, how did I have to do this? I said, I will not stop reaching out to new people until I have a messenger conversation. And I'm going to continue to do that every single day. And by the end of the week, I will have had at least 1 video conversation with somebody, or I wouldn't end my week. Saturday wasn't over till I had that conversation, right? What happened is I became comfortable because that was the standard. It wasn't something I achieved each day or I worked toward each day. That was just the standard. It's just the way I became. So I said, well, now I got to do 2 a day. That's my new standard, because I realized 1 was easy and I was starting to have multiple conversations. And I said, okay, that's my standard. Well, what happened over the years is my standard was I was having 25, 30 different conversations with people throughout the week that were brand new, openly communicating, listening to what it was that they were doing, what their needs were, what their goals were, their passions, their benchmarks that they were looking for. And I started to realize a lot of these people had benchmarks up here, but they had nothing here to fall back on. So they were constantly starting over from zero. See, that's not what successful, thriving business people do. That's not what thriving relationships do. You see a marriage of 50 years and it looks like they're still dating and they're young and they're in love. You realize they're not meeting for the first time. They've built 50 years of good times in relationship because there becomes a standard of listening, a standard of communicating, a standard of loving one another, a standard of putting the other one first. This becomes the standard which constantly raises the bar. It's impossible to not succeed. It's impossible to not excel. It's impossible to not advance in your life, in your career, your business, your relationships, if you set a standard to go by. Now, what is a standard? How do we actually establish a standard in your life? Well, much like my example, I just stopped and said, what's the absolute bare minimum that I must do to get the result that I'm looking for? And where am I right now? Those aren't often the same thing. Maybe I have to have 10 conversations a day to get a client by the end of the week, but I'm only having one conversation every 4 days. So what's the standard? The standard is I have to have one conversation every 4 days. That's my standard. I must. But the standard isn't what you're achieving. That's no less than. Which means once you hit that, you just keep going. You do as much as you can. And guess what? Week number 2 comes around. You look back at week number 1 and say, what was I able to accomplish? That becomes your standard. That becomes the standard. Okay, maybe you're a content creator. Okay, great. How many pieces of content, good quality content, did you actually put out for your audience last week? Okay, that is your standard this week. Okay, that's it. Nothing else. That's your standard. Okay, so when we look at that, we start saying, okay, what was my benchmark last week? What do I have to do this week as a bare minimum? And then every opportunity that you have, increase it. Maybe you have an extra 15 minutes. Cool. Think about content creation. You don't have to create the content, but are you thinking about the content that you can create at your next opportunity? Maybe you have a 5-minute drive to the grocery store. Take that 5 minutes and brainstorm some ideas. What would serve my audience? Okay, that's how you might do it in content creation. Maybe it's your health and your fitness goals. You say, okay, how much water am I drinking every day? Not coffee, not a guy who has a coffee pot sitting on his desk, right? But like, how much plain water do you drink every day? Well, catalog it if you don't know. Write it down if you don't know. Every day, write it down, log it, find out what you're doing, and that's your standard. Now raise the bar for yourself. If you want to advance, if you want to grow, if you want to move forward, then you have to step back, assess what you have, and then raise the standard, right? So this is the bare minimum. I've accomplished this before. I believe that if I can do something in repetition, I will get better. Therefore, I expect that I can always do above my standard, but never below. When you do this, you start to find that you'll advance more consistently. You'll see where you can actually look and chart what you're doing, and you can say, you know what, based on my pattern, in 3 months, I should be here. Right now, I'm here. In 6 months, I should be here. By the end of the year, right? So you'll actually be able to start to plot an outline and be like, oh my gosh, I can see my growth curve. And when you can see the growth curve based on the experience and constantly raising your standard, you can choose to do one of two things. You can say, I like that curve. Or you can say, how can I make that curve sharper, right? All of us have different goals in life. Some people just want to slowly just get better and better over time. Other people, like myself, I like to say, okay, cool, I'm growing here. How can I maximize the growth between this week and next week? How can I make as much growth this week as I did last month? What way can I exponentially increase the work that I'm doing? And my standard one of the standards that I have is how can I leverage what I'm currently doing to get a better result in less time? That's where my mind operates most of the time. Cool thing, I signed up a class for my wife, my daughter and I, for piano, learning some piano techniques on how to learn to play piano. And as I'm sitting here watching this guy present how to learn how to play the piano, manipulate your fingers, do finger yoga, doing chords, progressions, timing, rhythm, all of this stuff. And I'm sitting here going, I can't believe it. And I mentioned to my wife, I says, I'm sitting here watching a webinar on piano playing, and I'm literally creating a public speaking course that's going to massively simplify the process of becoming a more effective speaker, a more efficient and effective communicator, so that when people tune in, they actually listen, they hear what it is that you have to say, so that you can not just impact their life, but transform the future life they live as well. And all this, why? Because my mind operates and says, how can I currently leverage what I'm doing right now for an exponential growth for myself or those in my circle tomorrow? Is that your standard? Do you have a standard of excellence? Do you have a standard? Or do you just have goals? A lot of people say, I want to achieve someday, but they've never decided what must I achieve today. The beauty of finding a standard in your life is saying this is the bare minimum. And from that position, we'll be able to move forward with consistent growth and consistent development. And you'll find that you'll advance in whatever your endeavors may be each and every day. I mentioned the speaking course that's going to be coming up. If you're interested in that, please comment below, and we'll have a chat about when that comes out. I'll make sure that you get in there, have first shot at the access. So with that, I hope you guys have an amazing day. Remember that there is beauty, there is grace, and there is greatness within you. Now go and unleash that in the world today.